I am so thrilled, so thrilled to be here with two very special guests during my birthday week, no less. What a gift. I am here with Terri Carrington and Christie Dashiell, and we are going to talk about a plethora of things, but most importantly, their new album, We Insist 2025. Wow, this project. I can't stop talking about it. It's on my mind every day. It is a delight for the ears, but also for the mind. The story that you tell, the story that you're honoring with this album is really, really significant. And I'm excited to dig in. And I guess where I want to start is, what is it inside that you feel like is compelling you to respond to these conversations or to these current events?
Well, I think that if you're, a conscious person, you're seeing a lot of things go on around you, and you have the choice to respond or not respond. I mean, you have the choice to talk about it, complain about it, agree with other people about it, which I think, we all do when it comes to racism, sexism, and all the isms. But I also think we have a bit of a responsibility to do what we can. And everybody's ability and capacity to do things is different. So doing what we can does not necessarily have to be a heavy lift. And for me, it's actually not a heavy lift because I'm just doing what's fun for me, what I'm called to do, uh, and creating things artistically if they're responding to the moment or to a theme. I think that's what art is supposed to do. I mean, of course, we all do personal art, things about our lives, things about whether it's, love or whatever's on our mind. And, I've done that as well. But uh, for me, I feel like I have to be proactive and hopefully part of solutions.
Mhm.
And I think that's the thing that makes me tick.
Yeah. And it reminds me of one of my favorite authors is Zora Neale Hurston. And I actually started a book club last year just to read her works. And she has this famous saying, those that don't got it can't show it, and those that got it can't hide it. And that makes me think a lot about you and your work and just that, like you said, I mean, if you have a conscience, like, hello, do you see what's happening? And it's like, how can you not have any sort of reaction or response to what's unfolding.
Well,
Um,
I want to just say, I say that, but not flippantly, because as Black people, often we're consumed with survival. And that's kind of been a part of our history. So that's why I don't just expect everybody to, have the same capacity to do things.
Mhm.
So I just want to say that because it's not like everybody has to be on a front line. I do think that we need to educate um, ourselves, our children, our students, and our comrades and colleagues that are not Black. There's a lot of educating that has to happen across the board so that we're all contributing to a better society, and, in small ways and in big ways.
So We Insist 2025 was um I remember when I first listened to it, I remember wondering like, how did she know that this was going to be so timely, given everything that's going on right now. And then I was reading that actually what was on the forefront of your mind was Max Roach's centennial. And paying homage to him and his legacy and particularly his influence in your life. And so where were you when you first met him and had that first encounter with Max Roach?
Wow, that's uh, when people ask me about the things that happened in my childhood, sometimes it's hard to remember. So I don't remember the first time, but I think it may have been there's a picture on the back
Hmm.
of the record. So it might have been that time, or that could have been the second time. Um, but yeah, I think I was around 11. And that picture was taken at a club called Sandy's Jazz Revival
Mhm.
in Beverly, Massachusetts. And Max played there frequently. And I would go and he would let me sit in. And then, I saw him other places. We would do this thing called Rise and Fly. And we did it once at the Jackie Robinson Estate. And I don't know, maybe 14 that time. And so it's where drummers just trade off, basically.
Yeah.
Um, so that picture was us doing that. And, I would play it and I'd get up and he would play and he would rise and fly. And, this went on, this exchange. And you can do it with more than one person. So that's an early memory
Mhm.
of me with Max. And then also he tried to get me a record deal on Blue Note Records when I was 16. And we thought it was going to happen, but then it didn't happen. But it gave me the encouragement to do my own record, which came out a couple of years ago, 40 years later, um, called TLC. Well, the record's called TLC in France, but with George Coleman, Buster Williams, and Kenny Barron. But I just feel like Max supporting me in that way and believing in me that way gave me, the courage to just go ahead and do it independently.
Right. What were some of the early lessons or uh Max Roachisms that he was imparting to you?
Oh, goodness. I mean, it's funny with all these jazz greats that I've been surrounded by my whole life, nobody was really saying, you should do this or no, you should do that. Nobody was giving me quote unquote lessons on an instrument. Even with, my big mentors like Jack DeJohnette is one of my strongest drum mentors. And I would go to his house all the time, but it wasn't like he was sitting me down saying something. You just learn by observing and you learn by listening, watching, and just absorbing everything that's happening. And so I would go to Max's house, Central Park West, his apartment, sometimes. And he invited me to come stay over there. And I even babysat his twins at the time. He had
Oh,
to run
wow.
out, and I was a teenager. So I have those kinds of memories. It's just life memories. But I learned from watching him play and from his example as a as an activist.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. And Christy, what was your first impression or experience with Max Roach and his music, or Abby Lincoln as well?
Yeah, it's funny Terry says that because Terry's my mentor too, and I very much feel the same. Like sometimes we have conversations about life, but oftentimes I'm just like learning by your way. Even in these interviews, I'm learning, I'm just learning away. So it's cool to see you're passing this same thing on. But my first encounter musically with Max Roach was through my brother. He's a drummer, and I remember he loved Max Roach growing up, and so much so that he would do the song Mr. Hi Hat in tribute to him. So that was like my first encounter with hearing Max Roach's music. And then for Abby Lincoln, she wasn't one of the first vocalists that I listened to growing up. Just for whatever reason, I like her voice didn't hit me in the way that it hit me like years later. I think one of my teachers in college might have played the Freedom Now record, and I heard it, but I didn't really hear it. You hear it and you just kind of gloss over it. And then I started working with the bass player in DC, Michael Bowie, who played with Abby Lincoln. And I think in working with him, he like made me learn the music is the magic. And that was sort of like my first time really hearing Abby Lincoln. And then, I got into her music. But it's funny because when Terry and I were talking about doing this album, for whatever reason, I had been really listening to a lot of Abby Lincoln. I was like teaching her song Bird Alone to my students like every week, like around this. It might have been the same week that we talked about this.
Wow.
So yeah, it's just funny how like her spirit would be dropped in my
Mhm.
just my orbit for years, and then at the exact time that I was really trying to get inside her music, this came up.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so my understanding is that the the objective or the focal point was celebrating Max Roach's centennial. But what drew you to, of all the things in his discography and that the projects that he worked on, why We Insist?
I mean, it's just one of the ones that I always gravitated to over the years
Mhm.
and had a couple of arrangements on Freedom Day for different shows, that I was musical directing.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm also drawn to singers. So I think that particular album, stood out for me due to the collaboration with Abby.
Yeah.
And I guess that's it. No. I mean, yes, I could have picked another record, but that's one of his records that really resonated with me.
Yeah. And so when you first got that call, Christie, what were you thinking? How were you feeling? Were you like, oh, great, let's do this? Or did you feel like, whoa, what, what, what was going through your mind?
I mean, yes, I was feeling great. Like, oh my goodness, I get to, make a record with Terri. This is great because I'll have on record me and Terri, and I'll listen to it years and years and years later. But also, I was really nervous because I don't feel like I sound very much like Abby Lincoln. She has this command over her instrument. Not that I don't have that, but in a way that is just really powerful. And so I was really nervous that I might not be able to do that justice. So those were my first feelings, a bit of excitement and also just not feeling like I was up to the task.
That's so wild to me to hear that, first of all, because I feel like you have incredible command over your voice. And in each of these tunes, I'm just like, wow, I really don't think you could have picked someone better to embody this not just the music, but the moment, actually. And the partnership between the two of you is truly like transcends the whole thing, but it also just fits the message so perfectly. And one of my favorites is Triptych. And I remember when I first put the album on, I was like, I'm so curious what they're going to do here. Because, we all know the original. And I remember the first time I heard the original, I was like, oh, and she is screaming. All right, yes, girl, rage, let it out, there is something very cathartic about that. And certainly, I think we all could use a good scream right now. But I love what
Yeah.
you chose to do instead. And so, was there ever a moment where you were originally going to do the scream, or was it always planned to do spoken word? How did that evolution come about? I'm really curious.
Go ahead.
I think I was in the studio. I was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to scream." It had been a really long day, and I was just like, "I can't do that." And so Terry very gently suggested a spoken word, like later, much later though, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I thought we might do some screaming, but I'm glad we didn't because, first of all, I think everything needs to be organic and authentic
Mm.
to the people involved, at least to some degree, even though if I'm leading something, I have my ideas. But I don't feel that I really ever push my ideas in an uncomfortable way. I do think I push people, but hopefully not in an uncomfortable way. So Christy was real certain that she wasn't screaming. So I just said, okay, we'll find another thing to do here. And I wrote those words as uh, which I kind of in the end, I'm not gonna say I like it better, but I think that it was nice to not copy um, what Abby did in that way, because then the screams are going to be compared to the screams.
Right, right.
I mean, you know what I mean? And it's just uh, like I wouldn't have probably been able to scream myself. I mean, I would have been acting.
For
You know what I
sure.
mean? It's not in me to just scream, even though, like you said, we could all use a good scream right now. But I think I may have tried to find a way to scream that would be like me. My screams probably would have been curse words or something like that, you know? Like, I don't know if I could just scream without it being attached to
Mhm.
some words. So then I would have had that E next to the record, the explicit
Right.
sign. So hey, we're good. We did good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You like it was cool because you recognized just immediately that that wasn't a place that I was really ready to go yet, and I don't really have that in me at this point. That kind of like blood curdling scream that Abby Lincoln did, because I mean it was really rageful
Mhm.
and honest to her. So it was really cool that we found something that felt authentic and honest for
Mhm.
all of us in that movement.
And I remember in when I first heard it, it just made me think it's almost like an Easter egg because now you do get to what's so incredible is that the way that you guys ordered the album and put your own thumbprint on even the same five tunes from the 1960 version, it still encourages you to go and appreciate and uh compare and contrast, not for the sake of like, oh, this one's better, that one's better, but just to appreciate the evolution and the response that you guys were facilitating to what they did before. And so I mean, truly, I believe it was so brilliantly done. And the spoken word also reminded me of um, it just feels like that's kind of the sound of our era right now. You know, even here in San Antonio, there have been so many protests over the last 5 years, whether it's for, Black Lives Matter, whether it's for, Palestine, whether it's for the LGBTQIA community, in Texas, there's always something to be protesting. And so that to me is almost kind of like the sound of this particular chapter in our living history. The chants, the spoken word, the poetry, we're all trying to cope right now. And poetry, art, visual arts, music arts are a lot of the things that me and people in my community are clinging to just to try to like get through this moment and but not just get by but to really persevere. And I think that's what they were trying to I think that's what Max and Abby and Oscar Brown Jr. were trying to inspire at the time is like, let's actually stand up, get up, chin up, and reclaim your identity. Don't cower, and I think this album achieves the exact same energy, but in a really fresh way, so and in a way that acknowledges what we see and hear and experience currently through the arts and through jazz as well.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always nice to hear what other people think, about the work that you do, because in essence, you're not doing it for yourself. You're really doing it for other people to interpret,
Mhm.
and for it to serve, something, uh, serve, something in with whatever they may need at the time. So whenever you can do that, I think you've succeeded. So just hearing you talk about it, uh, whether I thought about it like that or not, is really makes me feel good. Thank you.
Yes. And another tune on the album that I've been thinking about a lot is the first version of Freedom Day. And I did a listening session with some friends of mine, and I played for them the 1960 version. And I was like, okay, so you hear how they approach this differently, right? And we all thought that, and maybe this was us projecting, but we were like, it feels, there's almost like a weariness in the part one on We Insist 2025, which is definitely how I feel. Like, I'm tired. I'm tired of asking, are we really free? Is this the so-called freedom that we've been talking about for how many decades? And then in part two, you start to hear like, you know what? No, I'm gonna get up. We got this, guys. Sometimes we might have to take a rest. We might have to scream, cry, curse, break things, but we're gonna get back to it. But I wondered, was that intentional? What am I projecting? Am I projecting my own weariness? Or what was the um the ethos or the approach with rewriting Freedom Day in that way for part one?
I think that you're actually right, on target, even if I didn't think about it like that from the beginning, because I'm not thinking necessarily, let me write something or arrange something that has this emotion or that emotion or saying this. I mostly just follow my inclinations. So the biggest thing I thought is, I know that I want to make this a ballad. I want these lyrics to just sit in a different way as a ballad. So I just started and followed wherever it took me. But what I think that you're tapping into is I am quite weary, I'm tired. I work like so much. Anybody that knows me knows I'm working all the time. So I tend to be in a constant state of being tired. And I guess weary can sometimes come with that. Though I'm an optimist and I'm always pushing for the next uh, accomplishment or the next thing, so that the work doesn't feel in vain. Um, but I think you picked up on an energy that I wasn't actually aware that may be coming across. But when the arrangement started coming to me, I felt like it was from a woman's perspective. I felt like it was kind of sexy and seductive, in a way to make you really hear the lyrics
Mhm.
differently and feel the energy of the song and what the lyrics can provoke differently than the original. And that was really the goal.
Mhm. Yeah. What about for you, Christy? When you were in the recording studio, what were you tapping into, or where did your mind go, particularly for part one, Freedom Day?
Yeah, well, Terry and I had talked about kind of it has a sensual kind of quality to it. So we were thinking about freedom from a woman's standpoint in terms of like my body and how I choose to present in this world. But also there was this, it felt like when I was looking at the lyrics, there was like this question mark that was not in the lyrics necessarily, like in the written lyrics. So when I was singing it, I was, in terms of like my phrasing, I was thinking about how can I sing this in a way that feels more like a question? Like,
Mhm.
am I really free? Do I have freedom over my body? Like, what sorts of freedoms can I walk into as I'm like singing this song, as I'm still in question about who I am and where I fit in this world too.
And there's a really gorgeous trust between the two of you on this album. And, Terri, you really empowered Christy, not just as a vocalist, but also as an arranger. And so, Christy, I'm wondering, how did that trust and that freedom change the way that you approached your artistry and showing up for this music?
Yeah, it felt really good because I've never had a band leader call on me to really use like my full artistry. Like they're always, asking me to maybe sing and improvise, but never come and arrange and like offer like my vocal arranging and just all the things that Terry asked me to do. Like she asked my opinion about things. Um, and it felt really good that a band leader would see that in me, and even if I wasn't quite ready to do these things, give me the space to explore. Especially with arranging Freedom Day Part Two, I had been taking like arranging lessons, so I was really excited to try these new sounds that I had been working on, but I didn't really have an opportunity outside of just practice and trying to write for my band. So it was really great to get a chance to practice those in real time. Yeah, just it was great. It was really wonderful to have someone trust me in that way.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that that's one of the things that you do as a band leader. You empower the people that you're working with if you're a good band leader, because otherwise it's hierarchical. It's top down. Like that's how some people band lead. But I mean, I'm looking at Art Blakey, for instance, who had music from everybody, in his band. Uh, and really helped to break Wayne Shorter, as a composer. Uh, Max Roach, of course, he wrote great music, but he also had people that worked with him write music. So these are the examples that I saw, you know, growing up. So even Herbie Hancock asked me to bring a song, once. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because it could have been easy. I know, like the nature of what we were doing, it the turnaround was really quick. So all of us bought in tunes, but it was just the way you, Terry, asked me. It was really thoughtful, and it was intentional too. It wasn't like, oh, can you just bring in a tune? It was like you thought about the tune I was gonna arrange. You asked me about like all kinds of things that made me feel like I, really had a voice in what I thought mattered.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it does matter.
Yeah.
And you can hear it. And even with the um ensemble that you brought together, this ensemble is interracial, intergenerational, international. It's so diverse, which I feel like is such a perfect reflection of, your values, especially Terry. And I was wondering how the, different identities and background stories of each of the musicians help to shape the sound and the message of We Insist 2025. And were there conversations in the studio about, shared global struggles, not just American ones?
Well, we did this record so fast, there were no conversations in the studio about much other than the takes. Um, I think the real answer to your question is that these freedom struggles are everybody's problem. If I look at the struggles that Max Roach and Abby Lincoln were talking about, these are not issues that just Black people should address. They're not issues that just Black people created, didn't create at all. So, um, just like if you look at gender in jazz, this is not a woman's problem. It's manifested itself that way, but the actual core of systemic oppression wasn't, even though some women oppress other women, of course, but the core of it, stems from uh, patriarchy, white male patriarchy.
Mhm.
Um, so it only makes sense to me to have a multiracial group to talk about these issues. Not that you can't do it uh, without that kind of grouping and still it be relevant, but for me, that's what makes sense. Um, and I really called people. Well, it just works out this way because the people on the record, for the most part, are people that I signed to Candid Records.
Mhm.
So it's a Candid family album. But, I didn't sign anyone that doesn't have a progressive outlook on things.
Right.
So, and people that I've worked with before, and as far as yeah, people from different parts of the world, yes, freedom is uh, a global issue in in different ways in different countries, but it's everywhere, where people are concerned about that. So you could really have yeah anybody talking about it as it relates to them. Um, and if you're playing jazz, then you need to understand the specific freedom struggles that African Americans
Mhm.
have had to deal with. So for all those reasons, uh, that kind of collaboration makes sense to me.
Mhm. There were two artists that I wanted to ask you about. One is, and I hope I'm pronouncing this person's name correctly, Ayodele.
Ayodele Koso.
Nice. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, so shortly before, actually, I think it was the week this album came out. I was doing a week-long feature on Jerry Allen.
Okay.
And I remember I played um, the tune Philly Joe. I believe that was the one that she worked with the tap dancer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it
Maurice
was on,
Chestnut.
yes, on that album. And I remember it just so happened that in the same week that I heard this, and then I saw that you guys were also working with a tap dancer, and I know that, you have a lot, storied history with Jerry, and I was just curious, is that where the inspiration came from, or maybe from another somewhere else, but to have that additional percussive layer with the tap dancer?
Yes, I mean, let's see, how do I tap dance has always been connected to jazz.
Right.
Uh, Dance in general has always been connected to jazz. Um, Tap specifically has to do with rhythm, so it's sometimes difficult to play with tap dancers. I've played with several tap dancers, and it can be a challenge, but it's like, it's like percussion when it's working, and it's like, just two driving forces in two different ways. So I've always, had some experience with it, on occasions, but I didn't never really focus on it. I did do a lot of tributes to Jerry after she passed and included some tap in those. I've written some pieces that include dance, mostly modern and contemporary, and I've written for some dance companies. So I've always felt a connection with dance. This is the first time I had somebody actually tapping on a record. But I was really trying to show that connection because also Max, he worked with dancers as well. So it to me connected some of his philosophy. But most jazz musicians, I mean, so many drummers actually tapped, like Roy Haynes and Jack DeJohnette too, um, and Buddy Rich. Uh, but I never could dance myself. But I felt like for me at this time in the music, this kind of interdisciplinary approach is really important because jazz needs to continually challenge itself with relevance to the moment and to what's happening and audience building, all of that. We need to um, come together as artists from different disciplines, and it expands our creative thinking, expands what we do. So I'm always thinking about that, whether it's visual artists, dance,
Mhm.
not quite theater, I don't think, but mostly dance and visual artists I try to collaborate with. So I think it pointed to the past because there were so many great tap dancers when I was even growing up, that were still alive, Jimmy Slide and the Nicholas brothers, etc. Um, and I also have a strong attraction to the Harlem Renaissance period. Um, how do I say I'm jealous, that's envious of what was going on then, and wished that we could have those kinds of uh, collaborations and just that kind of community that's not just so insular with our discipline.
Mhm. Yeah. And I hear that sonically as well, the interdisciplinary, you have so many, you have, blues, you have gospel, you have Afro-Latin rhythms on this album. And so that blending and melding is also and that, collaborative energy is also heard even just in the rhythms and the, music traditions that I can hear on
Mm.
the record as well. And the second artist I want to ask you about is Julian Priester, the only one on this album who was also in the 1960 version, and he was almost 90 when you recorded this. So, what was that conversation like? Did he come out and record in person? Did he do it remotely?
Yeah, he did it remotely. He overdubbed.
Okay, yeah. But
Yeah.
did you get a sense of perhaps what this opportunity and what this being able to record on We Insist 2025, what his feelings were about revisiting this music and this record?
I didn't actually get a whole sense about all that. I mean, we spoke on the phone and um he was, I think, happy for the call and happy that this particular album was being revisited. But I didn't really, we didn't get into any details. Like we didn't talk about the original recording. I was mostly asking him how he was doing. I hadn't seen him in quite a while. I, played with him once, but that was over 20, 25 years ago. So I just really was checking in with him and more about that kind of thing opposed to the album.
Yeah. That's really, really special though. And, it's just like I just I hope this like ends up in the Smithsonian at some point. It just as an archive, and as a unit of measuring this living history that we're all experiencing right now, and as it connects to another really critical point in American and especially Black American history.
This is the work that we have to do.
Right.
That's why the only reason why I say yes to half the things I say yes to is because I don't feel that enough artists or people that actually really know uh, about these things in depth are on the side of marking what's great and what's not, or what's historically relevant and what's not, or what should be in the time capsule. So 100 years from now, somebody looks back,
Yeah.
we all have to look at these processes and, try to get involved. So if you think this album belongs someplace, yeah, go, write a letter.
I will. I will. And I just feel like, first of all, you hit the nail on the head. And it reminds me of that line from the musical Hamilton. I am a Hamil nerd. And I love that line that says, "Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?"
Mm,
And, you know, I don't know how that man or the team that he was writing with, Lin-Manuel Miranda, boiled down the concept of legacy to such a
mm,
succinct legacy, but also power dynamics. Because that's really,
mm,
really what they're trying to say with that. Who
mm-hmm,
lives, who gets to live, who dies, or who sometimes whose life is taken from them, and then who now has the power of the pen
mm,
to tell your story. And I'm always encouraging, especially women, and especially the women of color in my life, please document your life in some way. So if there's a record that you were here and that you
mm-hmm,
lived and that you danced and that you made music and that you smiled and that you loved, and so that no one can then go back and say, oh yeah, Christie didn't do that. No, no, you said it. You documented that for yourself in ink, and so this to me is such an important record, and something that I really hold on to as well as someone who doesn't necessarily feel like I'm always going to be boots on the ground, fists in the air, but who definitely tries to find my area of influence and understanding and uh, my own way to reconcile what's in my heart and what's actually happening in the world. Uh,
mm-hmm.
and it makes me think about, there's this conversation these days about, the term woke has been weaponized in political discourse and often in bad faith. And so as artists are
Mm,
again reflecting the times and making work that centers equality, truth, visibility, justice, and even like you said earlier, Terry, just empathetic understanding.
mhm.
What vocabulary do you reach for or align with now? Or what language feels most honest or most hopeful for both of you?
What language uh, feels most honest? What do you mean exactly though? Like what language feels most honest?
So I guess like, people are demonizing the word woke now,
Oh, I
but
see.
is there other language that you use,
Mm,
even if it's not necessarily spoken, but maybe it's something that is there something we should listen for, like the language in your music or how you're vocalizing, that you feel like this is how I am delivering the same message, but in a way that people can actually understand? Because that's another thing that I think about a lot is we're in a time right now where people are rejecting news and traditional like legacy media in certain situations. But I always feel like art and artists can communicate those heavier,
mhm.
more unsavory, weighty topics in a way that people will actually sit with.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that is definitely part of the role of artists. So for me, I'm not attached to words and uh especially some of this, these words keep changing, as you said. I mean, I probably in my history, just with slang and so I'm starting to say something just as it's going out. You know, I'm late to the party in general with what's happening because I feel like I just don't have time to keep up with all these things. I was really, like when I look at if we look at, the words, Negro, Black, African American, I was like, oh, good, we settled on something. So, not to keep, because the words are just words. You know what I mean? It's just a way to convey something. So I have an attachment to even the word jazz. A lot of people don't like that word. I'm okay with it because it depends on how you're using it, how you're saying it, what you mean behind it. To me, the history is so rich that I don't mind saying it, even if the origins of the word were negative. Um, we claimed it and we reclaimed it, and there's all kinds of reclamations happening with words, um, with the N word, with the B word. People are reclaiming things all the time. So uh, I think that we just communicate as best we can, and scholars they that's part of their job, I guess, to kind of give words where they weren't. So now we have gender justice, right? Have an institute. I didn't know what to really call it. I thought, well, gender equity, when I was thinking about this. And I spoke to a couple of scholars, Gina Dent and Angela Davis, um, Annika Simpson, and they were all saying, I think you should say gender justice. I'm like, okay, I get it. You explained it and why that word means more because it implies transformation and how you can have equality and equity uh, and still haven't addressed the things that created the inequality and inequity in the first place. So justice is the right word. So we're all evolving and the words are evolving. And I think the work of scholars is so important, which is why, we're going to be having scholars in residence at our institute at Berkeley because this work is attached, as well to the music. And when you're dealing with scholarship, and you're a creative artist, you start to be able to put those things together. So for me, you're right. Like the beauty about even, yeah, Angela Davis says this better than me. She says that, music allows her to feel that which she cannot put into words. So I'm like, yeah. And so she, because I was thinking like I'm not doing anything, like, wow, all these people have done so much, in the way of activism. She says, no, but what you're doing is important, for this reason. It's just, and it's something that, so many activists, can't do and may not even have the same impact as musicians. Um, so I kind of don't think about the verbal language as being important, even though it is important, and we have to be able to call things what they are. But those things evolve, and as we evolve as human beings. So I'm okay for somebody else to be on that uh, verbal evolution uh, train.
Yes. Well, and so for you, Christy, as a vocalist, as someone who is literally vocalizing these sentiments and this feeling of, protest, resistance, reimagining. I love that, especially in Triptych, kind of bringing in the Afrofuturism movement in a way. And I think especially as Black people, we need to like expand our imaginations, but that's
Yeah.
another tangent. But as a vocalist, what language do you feel most at home in? Especially right now as words are being chopped up and remixed and demonized and things are being turned on their head. How do you find your language?
Yeah, I agree with everything Terry said. Um, because like words have meaning and of course they're powerful, but I think more than anything, I've learned that intention is equally as important. Um, I think the language that feels good to me is like as long as I'm being intentional in my art and being honest, that's really important to me. But also like bigger than that, like living in this calling that I know is mine, like and serves just serves like a much greater purpose than myself, Hopefully my calling serves the freedom fight, serves the equity and justice fight. And like the idea of like your role in the resistance keeps coming up, and I definitely, you know, I feel like as long as I'm walking in purpose in my calling, then my role in the resistance will become like more and more clear to me as I continue. Um,
And even in your own album, Journey in Black, you lead with ancestral voices and these, deep emotional themes of grief and love and memory, And so did you also feel like some of those personal threads were showing up again as you were shaping We Insist
oh yeah.
2025?
All the time, like all the work that I've done has this thread, and it's amazing to see like how the spirit is like just present in my life and calling me to do projects that really align with,
Mhm.
my purpose and my passions. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And language plays a big role in this album. I love Boom Chick and Dear Abby. I actually started to tear up during Boom Chick when you guys said hey Max, we got your back. I don't know why.
Mhm.
Every time, I don't know why. There's just something in me that is just like, and I think it's just that feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself, recognizing the incredible legwork that someone did to help you get many strides ahead. And it's almost like it feels like you're like reaching back to grab the baton, to keep going. And even now, like, ooh, I don't know why it just gets me and it makes me feel so emotional. Um,
Mm. I
and
think
in
that's
here,
beautiful,
yeah.
just that you feel that because that was definitely the intention. And because I was there and, I can say that as somebody that knew him and say we're trying to continue, the work that you did. And I can also say it as a drummer, we're trying to continue the work that you did. Um, and that's exactly the sentiment, that I have because this is a continuum. And this is also jazz is an apprenticeship art form. So we have to have the backs of people uh, before us and coming after us. But to hear you understand that and it affects you deeply is really beautiful because that means that this kind of community spirit and sense of what jazz is, is so important. And that's what the beauty of this music is all about, you know.
Yeah. So I'm also curious. So, when making music about injustice, resistance, pain, whether it's communal or personal, how do you also protect joy? And is there a piece on this record that surprised you in terms of where it brought you emotionally that allowed joy to surface, even when the subject was at its heart so weighty?
Yeah, I was telling Terry sometimes I feel guilty for having so much joy because there's so much pain and there's so much to be angry about. Um, but sometimes I feel like that suppression of our joy is on purpose because, there's like this feeling that the world doesn't want Black people to be happy and to live fully. Um, and like I remember one of my friends, another mentor, told me like the one of the greatest forms of resistance is wellness. And so I think in order to be well, I just have to live life holistically, joyfully, sorrowfully, indifferent. Um, but yeah, on I think there's on Tears for no, not Tears, Joyful Noise, the last track,
Yep.
that's when you can like really hear the joy like bubbling over. Um, I feel like it has so much church in it, and church has always been a part of my upbringing where every Sunday, no matter what happened during the week, you go to church for better or for worse and go dance, sing, clap, and then go and eat at the fellowship hall, eat mac and cheese and fried chicken and all this stuff. Um, so yeah, I think that joy is like super present, even though the themes are very heavy. The joy is present, the dance is present because dance is part of how we, you know, communicate our joy and our sorrow. But yeah, I feel like joy is kind of throughout the album. And even in Tears for Johannesburg, there's like this really mournful melody that's like juxtaposed with the really kind of dance like, um, accompaniment. So yeah, it's all through the record for me.
Yeah, I think that the idea is that joy is also a form of resistance. And that was really where a lot of this is coming from. And we are at, different time period, of course, than the original it was in 1960. It's not that the theme is not as serious, it is just as serious, but we are also we have certain freedoms now, certain freedoms that we have experienced that weren't, necessarily happening then. But joy was always happening. But the priority, back in the day was really to address, the craziness. Um, but like I like to think about even in slavery times that these were complete human beings. It was awful, of course. Everything, they were going through was awful, but they also had joy in their lives. Because if we don't think about them as complete human beings with joy too, then I don't think we're honoring them fully because I mean, even if it was reserved for Sunday, you know, they had that kind of agency to have joy, even if it was just behind closed doors when they weren't around their oppressors. So I feel like honoring that is just as important.
Absolutely. And it's woven throughout our history. I mean, the fact that, our instruments and rhythms survived, the transatlantic slave trade and, you know, women still found a way to gather and have community throughout all these different chapters. And, that's also part of it is the chronology of the Black experience from, arriving to American shores through slavery, through freedom, question mark, through civil rights, this is to echo everything that you said, the joy is always there, and that was a part of how we survived and have made it to today in the first place. And again, to quote my favorite Zora Neale Hurston, who is also a Harlem Renaissance writer, I love this quote from her. I am not tragically colored. There is no great sorrow dammed up in my soul, nor lurking behind my eyes. I do not mind at all. I do not belong to the sobbing soul of Negrohood who hold that nature somehow has given them a low down, dirty deal and whose feelings are all hurt about it. Even in the helter-skelter skirmish that is life, I have seen that the world is to the strong, regardless of a little pigmentation more or less. No, I do not weep at the world. I am too busy sharpening my oyster knife. Ah,
Go ahead.
I love that woman so much. But that to
Yes.
me like embodies that joy that no one can take from us, though they have tried in all the different generations and evolutions of history, but it's ingrained and you can't separate it from from who we are, from who we've always been, from our music, from our art, from our writing. And so I think you guys communicated that and honored that so masterfully as well on this album.
Thank
Um,
you.
And my last question is, I'm always curious about kind of those unheard or unseen moments. So I'm just wondering, is there one story or conversation or maybe a an artistic choice from the making of We Insist 2025 that you think that people may not notice unless you tell it? Maybe like an Easter egg, or just a moment that haunts you or humbles you from this process that's not obvious just from listening to the album?
Maybe Christie should. Maybe she might have.
I don't know. I mean, I know we worked really, really hard. The studio days were they were long days. Um, but then also like they were long, and of course there were moments where I was frustrated at myself. But when I look back on it, I'm just very happy to have learned a new way, a new like approach. Um, Something that stands out to me is us eating because I like to eat, so that's probably not a surprise. But we were snacking throughout, and that was fun because we would be like in between takes, going to the table, snacking and just talking. But it made the music, it made the music even better, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the eating part because I don't know, somebody from that was there. I don't even know who it was. Maybe it was, I don't even remember, but said that that I go, like I get into this work mode and go a long time without really eating,
Well, that's
and
true.
then so I was feeling bad because I was feeling like, oh shit, I didn't feed them soon enough.
It was the
Which is
second
why I
day.
had so many snacks, right? Because I was just like, okay, we're gonna get busy, it's gonna be hard to stop. Like when to figure out when to stop. But if people, have enough snacks, maybe, if it goes a little past the moment that you really want to eat, we'll be all right. But I feel like maybe I should, you know, next time just think about that because I don't want people thinking that, I'm a taskmaster or something.
Well, you're very serious and focused in the studio. And yeah, we did have to remind you at one point, hey Terry, can we order some dinner? And you were like, oh yeah, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
You were locked in.
And
Well, it shows, and we can hear it and we can feel it. And I hope you guys did break some good bread after putting in some work on this album. Um, Thank you so
Absolutely.
much for your time and for your vulnerability. And I mean, I wish I could just spend the rest of the day with you guys. Thank you so much. I really
Thank you,
appreciate your
Bria. I really
time today.
appreciate, yeah, absolutely, and really appreciate your support.
Thank you. Thank you so much.